On a cold March night in 1867, inside a quiet room in Washington, D.C., two men sat at a table covered in documents, maps, and a single bottle of wine. One was William H. Seward, the ambitious U.S. Secretary of State. The other was Edward de Stokel, the Russian minister to the United States. The clock struck 4 in the morning, candles burned low, and after hours of intense negotiation, they'd picked up their pens and signed a deal that would change the map of the world forever. The United States had just agreed to purchase Alaska, an enormous frozen wilderness from the Russian Empire, for $7.2 million. That's about 2 cents an acre. At the time, many Americans mocked the decision, calling it Seward's Folly and Seward's icebox. But history would prove them spectacularly wrong. The story of how America bought Alaska for pennies begins not in Washington, but in St. Petersburg, Russia. By the mid-19th century, the Russian Empire was stretched thin. Maintaining their distant North American territory known as Russian America was expensive and difficult. The land was vast, isolated, and hard to defend. British forces in nearby Canada posed a constant threat, and after losing the Crimean War, Russia desperately needed money. Selling Alaska seemed like a smart way to both raise funds and prevent Britain from seizing it in the future. Meanwhile, across the world, the United States was recovering from the Civil War. Its leaders were looking to expand their influence westward and into the Pacific. William Seward was a man with a vision. He dreamed of an American empire stretching across the continent and into Asia. When he heard Russia might be willing to sell Alaska, he saw an opportunity that others couldn't. In 1866, quiet conversations began between the Russian ambassador and U.S. officials. At first, even President Andrew Johnson was hesitant. The idea of buying a frozen, remote land didn't excite the American public. But Seward pushed forward. He knew Alaska wasn't just empty land, it was a strategic gateway to the Pacific and Asia, and possibly rich in natural resources. Negotiations moved quickly. Russia wanted a fair price, but it also wanted the deal done before Britain caught wind. In the early hours of March 30, 1867, after an all-night bargaining session at Seward's house, the two nations reached an agreement: $7.2 million for more than 586,000 square miles of land. To put that into perspective, Alaska is larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. The treaty was rushed to the Senate the next morning. Seward's opponents laughed at the purchase. Newspapers ridiculed him, saying he'd bought a giant icebox and a polar bear garden. Many believed it was a waste of money, especially at a time when the nation was struggling to rebuild. But despite the criticism, the Senate approved the treaty by a single vote, more than required. On October 18, 1867, in a quiet ceremony in Sitka, the Russian flag was lowered and the American flag was raised. Alaska officially became U.S. territory. For decades, most Americans ignored Alaska. It seemed remote, barren, and irrelevant. But everything changed in 1896, when gold was discovered in the Klondike region. Suddenly, thousands rushed north, and Alaska's untapped potential became undeniable. Later, vast reserves of oil, gas, timber, and fish turned the once mocked purchase into one of the most valuable real estate deals in history. Strategically, Alaska became a crucial military outpost during World War II and the Cold War, sitting just across the Bering Strait from Russia. Its location turned out to be far more important than anyone in 1867 could have imagined. Today, Alaska is a vital part of the United States, home to stunning landscapes, rich natural resources, and unique cultures. And it all traces back to a quiet late-night negotiation in Washington, when two men signed a deal that most people thought was foolish. Seward's Folly wasn't folly at all. It was one of the smartest land purchases in history, a story of vision, strategy, and a $7.2 million bargain that reshaped a nation.